Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another Citrix Ready technical webinar in our technical webinar series, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners like Cleafy have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. I'm Anil Kumar, your host today. And I'm part of the Citrix Ready technical marketing team, managing the network ecosystem. Prior to Citrix, I worked with companies like HP and Fujitsu, where I've had the opportunity to manage some medium and large scale Citrix infrastructure. Have always been working with Citrix's products, and it's been a real pleasure working with Citrix for almost 3 years now. Today we have Cleafy with us today, and they have a really exciting threat detection and protection software, and we'll see how it really helps secure your environments. To present along with me today, I have our main speaker, Giuseppe Nardiello. Hey, Giuseppe, I welcome to the technical webinar series. Could you talk a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, Anil, and hello, everyone. Yes, I'm currently Director of Product Management and Business Development at Cleafy. I'll be pleased to introduce our threat detection and protection solution to you today and run a little bit of a demo. I joined the company about 18 months ago. I have a previous working experience at BMC Software for 6 years in the same role. And well, you can read about me in my LinkedIn profile. Thank you.
That's great. Welcome once again, Giuseppe. I think that was a crisp introduction. Thank you so much. Right, Giuseppe, could you move to the next slide? Thank you. Right, so before I hand it over to Giuseppe to provide an overview of Cleafy and their product, I wanted to provide a very brief introduction about what Citrix Ready is and what we do here. Citrix Ready is an technology partner program where we showcase and recommend third-party products that demonstrate compatibility with Citrix's products. So with this, customers can quickly and easily find solutions which is trusted and recommended by Citrix itself, and you could find all these products published in Citrix Ready Marketplace, and the below links. So you could use the below links to visit our Citrix Ready Marketplace. And if you have, and if you'd like to join our program, know more about our program, please visit the link at the bottom. We will anyways share the links to you after the webinar. So we are very proud to have Cleafy with us today, and we'll see how Cleafy integrates with Citrix NetScaler, our award-winning ADC, to help secure your environment from advanced threats. Giuseppe will also explain how Cleafy helps in transparent threat detection and protection against advanced attacks to your online services. So without any further ado, let me hand it over to Giuseppe. One housekeeping item to keep in your mind: if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel available on the right-hand side in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll see and we'll address your questions during the Q&A session at the end. So Giuseppe, welcome once again, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the great introduction. I think we are going to start first with a quick survey. If you could please indicate the market segment industry your company belongs to. This is meant to be a quick assessment of your environment. And there are a few questions related whether you have already a fraud prevention solution, specifically for protecting your online services and end users. This will be mainly the topic for today's presentation. And a couple of other questions regarding whether you have also transaction monitoring solution that helps assessing the risk based on user financial behavior, and specifically a threat detection solution, advanced attacks. We are referring here to things like man in the browser, man in the middle, as we will explain in the following slides. So take your time for answering those questions, and thank you again for your time today. So let me move now to the agenda real quick. First of all, I'm going to give you a quick introduction of my company, just one slide, then focus on explaining how we do threat detection and protection, why our solution is an innovative solution for threat detection and protection. I'll explain how we fit and integrate smoothly into the NetScaler architecture, and then we're going to see a couple of videos explaining how the solution works in a couple of scenarios. And of course, we're going to conclude with question and answer, so feel free to ask your questions. We may pick up a few as we move along. All right, so Cleafy or Cleafy, depending on what is your preferred pronunciation, we don't mind, as long as you keep on liking us, was founded in 2014 in Italy by researchers and engineers from the Milan Polytechnic University. We have currently direct operations in Italy and US, and indirect operations in EMEA, Asia-Pac, and LATAM. We are a recognized vendor by key industry analysts, including Gartner. We've been recently included as a selected vendor by Gartner in their recent market guide for online fraud detection. But more importantly, our threat detection and protection solution has been successfully adopted by leading customers, in particular in the financial service sector, retail, corporate banking, for protecting millions of their end users. We started our partnership with Citrix about 1 year ago by validating our solution as Citrix Ready, and in December we had the pleasure of being named as Citrix Ready Partner of the Month. So at this point I can start with delivering the real content. So first of all, let me start with a few metrics that describe the dire status of fraud prevention today. In the last year, we have been observing an increased amount of attacks to online banking services. For example, according to Symantec, we are talking about 3.6 times increase in the last 3 years. According to another threat intelligence report from Kaspersky Labs, an estimated number of 1 million users have been attacked every year by so-called banking Trojans. On the other side, this is also a very interesting indicator. The number of malware variants has been growing fast, estimated 36% every year. I was reading today about mobile, specifically for mobile devices. We're talking about something like 54% every year. And we know that most of those variants have been introduced exactly for the purpose of escaping detection from solutions that are primarily based on signatures and pattern matching. I will come back to this point because this is one of our important differentiators. But before moving forward and explaining our solution, let me comment on why protecting online services is real tough today, tougher than ever. Well, first of all, this has always been an asymmetric game where your adversaries have more time and resources than you, as to quote Gartner. And today we know that fraudsters have even more tools, resources, and knowledge, right? But it is also true that the attack surface is expanding. Just think about new digital transformation initiatives that are publishing online services that were previously not accessible from external entities, a growing adoption of mobile devices, open banking APIs, new actors that are appearing in digital payment So it's not by chance. I would say that security is named as the first #1 concern in all digital transformation initiatives. But finally, the key reason why this is becoming really hard is that the growing attacks are leveraging the fact that unmanaged endpoints, whether those are web or mobile devices used by your end users, are easily targeted by advanced, sometimes targeted attacks that are leveraging adaptive, polymorphic, unknown, zero-day malwares. So before explaining how we deal with this problem, let me explain how does it happen, right? How the endpoints get infected, how frauds gets performed these days by the attacker. Usually there is a reconnaissance phase. For example, the attacker will be harvesting email addresses. This is usually followed by an initial compromise phase where the endpoint gets infected by the malware, for example, via phishing vector. And at that point, the endpoint becomes part of a botnet controlled by the attacker using their command and control systems, which means the attacker can easily monitor and profile the user, for example, identifying that that specific user is a corporate finance user, understanding his or her transaction patterns. In the end, it will be able to perform the actions on the objective. This could be about doing transaction tampering, modifying transactions, or grabbing credentials, hijacking sessions, or performing an account takeover, right? And at that point, it will be able to execute the fraud. And as a final step, most likely, it will be going into stealth mode, possibly removing the malware and covering all traces. So why traditional approaches failed against this quite common scenario? Well, think about a malware detection solution. If this is a new malware variant, well, the malware detection solution would just say everything is fine. If we consider what would be the answer from a web application firewall, again, since this was a client-side injection, no SQL injection, for example, well, again, we would be fine and the transaction would be allowed to proceed without raising any flag. And even a transaction monitoring solution has the fraudster are usually closely mimicking the normal behavior of users, including the velocity of transactions, the typical amount of money that gets exchanged, their geolocation. They may use remote access tool to back connect to the original endpoint. Well, everything will look fine, but the fraud is still being executed. So how do we counter this? Or better, what is missing here? Well, what is missing is a continuous monitoring of the application integrity end to end. We need a solution that is capable of assessing the risk in real time by providing full visibility of threats on the endpoint side. The endpoint is really the missing, the weakest link, sorry, in the picture, right? So we need to have that application integrity end to end, including the endpoint side, and that's what will enable an adaptive approach to application protection as well. Gartner has introduced what they call a strategic framework called CARTA in one of their foundational research paper. And by the way, Cleafy is highlighted as a solution supporting this adaptive approach. So let me, at this point, start introducing why we are a unique, provide a unique approach to threat detection and protection. First of all, our solution is fully clientless. There are no agents installed, so there is no impact on the user experience or the endpoint performance. Our solution, this is a very important point as well, is transparent. No changes to the applications are required in order to support detection or protection. We don't touch the backend infrastructure, And as you will see, what we provide is an ADC level integration. We'll describe in more detail how the integration with NetScaler, specifically ADC, works. Our approach is not based on signatures and pattern matching, which as we just mentioned before, has been clearly failing in detecting new malwares and zero-day malwares. What we apply, as Gartner was also recommending, is a full application integrity check. And I have a few slides later on to describe and demo how this full application integrity check works. Our approach is adaptive, meaning that we enable a risk-based threat response, so you can act depending on the level of risk, and specifically also apply Cleafy protection by enabling a selective approach for preserving the integrity of the application, even when the endpoints are infected. Final point, very important, because Cleafy is intended to participate to an ecosystem where there are other components deployed, including a web application firewall possibly, or a transaction monitoring, which of course are doing their job, even if they're not capable of stopping all the advanced attacks. Our solution can easily integrate in any higher level risk engine, for example, as provided by a transaction monitoring solution, and security component, for example, a CM. The picture on the left-hand side clarifies the point of getting end-to-end visibility on the full application traffic by integrating at the ADC level, while continuously assessing the risk and monitoring applications in real time. So how do we do it? First of all, let me clarify this picture a little bit better in terms of the integration architecture. So this could be our Cleafy engine detecting threats in real time and supporting at the same time through RESTful APIs and push-pull integration mechanisms, integration with several components. But I want also to make sure that it is clear that we automate threat response by enabling, for example, risk-based authentication or protection mechanism, or any other action, any other threat response action that would be appropriate for that specific threat which has been identified, including possibly deflecting, redirecting sessions, or banning IPs or users, or entirely dropping session. Of course, this will depend on the security posture which you have identified to be appropriate for your environment. Now, why? Let's go a little bit deeper into how Cleafy delivers its key functionalities, in particular the full application integrity, and understand why, for example, according to 451 research, Cleafy represents the logical approach to securing online transaction. Of course, I was very pleased by this sentence being named as a logical approach. Of course, it was not logical before we introduced this technology, which has been patented by the US Patent Office. So let me start introducing how it works with a very simple example. Let's assume we have John here, who is the end user, who is requiring a content from the server side. That content gets generated. And first of all, we also generate, being integrated at the ADC level, as we observe the response coming from the server side. We also generate a dynamically obfuscated JavaScript code, which gets injected into the response. This is completely transparent to the application and end users. Also from the fraudster perspective, from the malware perspective, this content is coming from the application. So it's normal application behavior. At that point, when that JavaScript gets executed, we are in a position to collect the rendered executed content. This applies to both static and dynamic content, AJAX calls, API calls, and we also collect some environmental data. But nothing gets computed on the endpoint. This is, of course, also for security measures. And that rendered executed content gets returned back to the Cleafy engine, always through the ADC, asynchronously. So this makes possible not impact the end user performance, the end user experience and endpoint performance. Without in few milliseconds, we're basically in real time for every response, every request and response, every event, as we call it in the session, we automatically compare what has been the content generated on the server side and what has been the content rendered and executed, so that we can extract if there was any code injected, for example, by malwares. This code gets analyzed and clustered, as I'll clarify those terms later on. And we also are able to classify the threat, for example, identifying whether this was a man in the browser related injection. We calculate the risk score, and the risk score at this point for every event and for every session has been provided, so that at any point in time, as the session unfolds, you can inquire Cleafy and have an answer on what is the current level of risk. In Cleafy, our level of risk ranges between 0 and 1,000. And as mentioned in the slide, you can also tune the risk weight by assigning different risk weights to the different tags associated to each risk. All right, let me also explain real quick how dynamic protection works for web applications. So let's assume our endpoint has been infected. So we don't want just to detect if there was a risk, as we do and in real time. For example, in this case, we can see there is a 782 risk score and some additional information regarding, for example, a credit card information having been stolen during the session. We can also activate automatically our protection mechanism when we see that high level of risk or specific threat, by generating an obfuscated, a dynamic content, obfuscated content that gets served to the endpoint in place of the original content, which is dynamically encrypted and stored. So when that obfuscated polymorphic box, as we call it, is delivered in place of the original content, that means that because it has been obfuscated, there is no way for the attacker to tamper the content, and there are no possible hooks for the injecting into the known function, which of course is what is being used by a man in the browser scenario. At that point, the box itself would be requiring the original content, decrypt it on the fly, and of course replace itself with that content. So even if there was some code injection, that code injection would be wiped out. Now, as you understand, this approach for bot detection and protection is critically based on the ability to interact closely with the application delivery controller by analyzing the traffic at high performance, and possibly also modify the traffic, whether for injecting JavaScript or for replacing the expected content with the obfuscated box, polymorphic box. So, of course, we were pleased by customers liking the architecture that, let me repeat again, does not touch the endpoints, does not touch the application backend, does not require the application to be changed. It is completely transparent. And specifically, as I will be describing, the application, the solution really perfectly fits into a NetScaler architecture, specifically leveraging some unique capabilities provided by NetScaler ADC. So moving to the following slide, Anil, I don't know if you want to comment on this slide or you would like me to go through it.
Definitely. So it's really great to know that Cleafy is agentless and it does not really do any interruption with the application traffic, or it requires any kind of agents to be installed on the end user devices, and it does all the threat detection and protection transparently. And what's great is that it really integrates with our NetScaler ADC. So to talk a little bit about NetScaler ADC, for the 10th year in a row, NetScaler has been named a leader in the Gartner's ADC Magic Quadrant report. And it's also recognized for its advanced capabilities in the market and as the most visionary ADC with its leadership in DevOps application delivery. So I let Giuseppe talk through some of the advantages listed on the slide, but let me also shed a little light on why NetScaler ADC and what are its advantages. So first and foremost, so NetScaler has this unique software first approach. So no matter what form factor or the hypervisor or the cloud which you use, and NetScaler works there. So it could be any kind of application architecture and evolving data center technologies. The software first approach or the software based ADC works anywhere. And to add to that, our single API and management platform provides interoperability with any orchestration platform which you use. The second biggest advantage is our hybrid or multi-cloud manageability. So what it really means is, so in the present date with organizations running their applications in both local and cloud-based data centers, mainly to optimize resources. Citrix NetScaler ADC offers that real-time analytics and end-to-end visibility to your entire application infrastructure, regardless of where the applications live. The third biggest advantage is the DevOps and type of application delivery, into which also NetScaler fits in really well. So the current trend is DevOps and microservices architecture, which is really changing the way the applications are built and managed. And Citrix NetScaler allows you to bridge the gap between your traditional and DevOps applications by providing unified capabilities and management through a single console. So NetScaler also offers pooled capacity, which means so we offer licenses and pool-based model, and you can manage this all using the same pool of licenses, whether and it does not really matter if these NetScaler are in use at one data center or if it's distributed across. And the last thing I want to highlight about NetScaler is its ability to secure applications. So NetScaler defends against cyber threats, and it does not matter if it's on premises or if your applications are in the cloud. So the main features were the main feature which really helps in cyber security threats is the web application firewall feature, which is included in the NetScaler, and this gives you complete DDoS protection, strong identity and access management, and deep threat visibility, and this is where we integrate with Cleafy, right? So Cleafy, so as Giuseppe has explained, and will be demoing in the next few slides on how Cleafy really complements all the features of Citrix NetScaler ADC, and this is one of the winning combinations.
Thank you, Anil. Yes, of course, we really like the NetScaler ADC technology. I'm not a best expert on ADC technologies, but I really like the NetScaler when I started working on it. But I can tell you, our research and development team, they were really loving the solution with respect to other technologies that we had integrated with. And as Annie was saying, this is not just about leveraging NetScaler ADC, but also very well fitting into the application security portfolio provided by Citrix. So complementing, for example, NetScaler WAF capabilities as well, defending the server side and the endpoint side from advanced threats. Now, a little bit of information about how Cleafy leverage NetScaler. We do support all NetScaler families. Our solution has been verified on all NetScaler latest version, starting from 10.1, 10.5, 11, and 12. We provide an integration script which defines several NetScaler constructs. We have a full document explaining all the different steps which you can follow in case you need to adjust the installation script, integration script with respect to your specific NetScaler environment and any Cleafy architecture, for example, supporting multiple applications with one Cleafy instance. I would say it's pretty logical to leverage, again, that term from 451 research. This is also because of the clean architecture provided by NetScaler. So what we do define in our integration script, of course, as you may expect, some context switching actions and policies, a number of rewrite action and policies for detection purposes, and some others for protection purposes as well. There are some NetScaler variables and assignments that also get defined. But more importantly, we are leveraging both for detection and specifically for protection the nice capabilities that I'm sure you're familiar with, the HTTP callout policies. When we compare the integration with NetScaler ADC with other integrations we provide to other ADC technologies, well, for all the other technologies, we for protection, for enabling protection, we also need to deploy another component, basically a reverse proxy. Well, this is not the case for Citrix NetScaler. Our protection architecture doesn't need any additional component. And I can tell you, I'm sure this is also your experience working with your network security guys, that is always quite painful when you need to touch the delicate front-end architecture. So the fact that we can simply integrate smoothly in any NetScaler architecture without adding any additional component is a very nice feature. So thank you, NetScaler, and thank you, Citrix, of course. All right, I think after all those words, it's time for a couple of demos where hopefully you will see the product in action. For running real quick the couple of scenarios, I recorded a couple of videos here. But maybe, do we have any question, Anil? I guess you were about to interrupt me for questions that came from the audience.
That's correct. That's correct. So one of the questions I received was, I mean, one of the audience is interested to read the Carta document which you mentioned during the webinar, and if we could share it.
Yeah, we don't have redistribution rights yet on our website. We had it actually when that paper was published. But if you are a Gartner customer, we can certainly provide the link. Otherwise, we can certainly describe how Cleafy, why Cleafy is mentioned, how we fit into that specific Carta architecture and security adaptive architecture in maybe after the demo or as a follow-up from the webinar.
Sounds great, Giuseppe. Giuseppe, you did explain a lot about the man in the browser, the rat in the browser scenarios, and how Cleafy really helps detect all these anomalies and only allow trusted traffic through. But do we know if Cleafy also can manage account takeover scenarios?
Yeah, sure. And that's a great question because this will be the second scenarios that we'll be running. So in the first scenario that I'm about to run, we will see how we deterministically identify an injection. And we do it in a way that does not generate false positive. False positive really is the problem that most of the threat detection solutions out there are creating, which is a big operational pain. But we can also work in identifying what we call cross-session scenarios, where the attacker is basically blocking the user, stealing credentials, and leveraging those credentials in a clean session. So in that second session, of course, issued by the fraudster, there is no injection, but of course, we don't look just simply at one single session at a time. We look across all sessions, and we propagate the risk from the first session where the malware was stealing credentials to the second one. But instead of describing it, I suggest we look at the first video. So this will be about a normal scenario. You will see how Cleafy continuously monitors an application. Then you will see an injection. We are leveraging a Chrome plugin to simulate an injection, which of course may not be the way the malware would act up in the customer environment, but just for demo purposes. And then we will be showing exactly an account takeover scenario. Should we roll it? All right, so let's start by first looking at a normal transaction using an internet banking application called ProBank. Let's start by resetting the session as we were starting a brand new one. And let's have a look at how this looks on the Cleafy side. Let's move to the session page. We can see that we have a new session. This is the very first page accessed by the user. Cleafy is monitoring the entire application in real time. At this time, the session is still anonymous, and we can see the potential users based on the historical information who may, at this point, potentially access the service and be detected. As we can see, Cleafy is already detecting the application integrity. So far, we have a DOM underscore OK. The risk score is 0. And the session risk score is also 0. Now, let's move back to the ProBank application and let's connect. Let's log in using Luis as the account name, also providing the OTP. And at this point, we are in the transaction history page, and we may want to issue a new transaction to mark account number and the amount, pretty big amount of money, to execute the operation. If we look at how this session now looks like, we can refresh it and see that all the different steps, starting from the initial access to the page, the OTP exchange, the first page providing historical information, the wire transfer, all the different steps have been tracked. And during all those events, we had the application integrity checked, and the result was OK, which means the risk score for each of those events and at the session level is 0. We can see also that after we had logged in, the account has been correctly tracked by Cleafy, and we also have the information about all the other users who may have been accessing from this specific endpoint. All right, now let's have a look at a scenario where we have a malware injecting into the initial
home page of the application. I'm resetting the session to start a fresh one. And as you can see, the application integrity has been compromised. In addition to the standard username and password field, which likely will be grabbed by the malware. The malware is also explicitly requesting an additional field, a credit card number. The look and feel of the application has been preserved, so as a user, I may be led to believe that this is the normal application behavior. Let's look at how Cleafy will be looking at that scenario. The user has not logged in yet, but as we can see, this is the last session just a few seconds ago. We have a DOM integrity compromise. We have a man in the browser scenario. The risk score has been raised at the session level as well. And we can also inspect directly the snippet of code which has been injected. Okay, we can see the snippet of code which has been detected as suspicious. And as we see, the credit card information for additional field is exactly what was injected by the malicious code. We can also make this a blacklist in order to signify that from now on, this has to be detected as not simply a malicious injection, but something that corresponds to a tentative fraud which has been identified.
All right, so this was just the first
Let's start
scenario. And before running the second one, I want to clarify that the ability to extract the snippet of code is not just something nice, but it also supporting the ability to discriminate between generic and targeted attacks. Of course, targeted attacks that are crafted specifically against your services are much more concerning, and the ability to verify whether they are being designed against your application specifically, or as an injection that would occur to any website visited, or potentially talking about banks or any other industry segments for any other company is a very important information. Plus, it is not unlikely that by looking at this snippet of code, you can see some information, additional information about the attacker infrastructure, the attacker techniques and techniques and procedures as well. And finally, you can understand the user experience under attack, as we will see also in the next demo. So let's roll the next one.
First, looking at a normal transaction using an internet banking application called ProBank.
Okay.
Let's start by first looking at a normal transaction.
Sorry, moving to the next one. Okay, that was the previous one. And yes, running.
We're going to demo how Cleafy can detect a more complex attack scenario, namely an account takeover scenario, where the end user is being prevented by the malware from logging in while the attacker is issuing a new session leveraging stolen credentials. Let's start with the legitimate user accessing our internet banking application. And let's enable our malware here. Let's reset a session and start afresh. And before logging in, let's move to the Cleafy console to see how things look like. We can see that a high risk has been already assigned to this session, even if the session is still anonymous. We can see that different users have been temporarily associated to this session, which remains anonymous, and a web injection has been detected. Let's have a look at the snippet of code of this specific injection. But before analyzing the snippet of code, which has already been extracted by Cleafy, let's look at how the malware is acting up as the user now tries to log in. Let's insert the password. Aha, here we go. We got a message saying your account has been temporarily suspended as a security measure. Please retry in 60 seconds. Of course, this is not the expected application behavior. However, end users would assume this is just all right. And in a real case, this message would also display the bank logo, the fonts, so as to make it even more credible. However, with Cleafy, this malicious injection has been detected as soon as the page has been consumed, as we can see here. And the user is already displaying the potential users behind the session based, of course, on the historical accesses from the same endpoint. With Cleafy, we have direct visibility on the user experience under attack. This means that we can discriminate between generic and targeted attacks, get insight into the attacker tactics and procedures since the very early phases of the kill chain, and more importantly, be in a position to decide countermeasures as we improve our security posture. But first of all, let's see how Cleafy can also detect in real time when the attacker is now leveraging stolen credentials to perform a fraudulent transaction. So let's open now a browser in incognito and let's try to leverage the stolen credentials. Inserting the stolen password and the stolen OTP as well. Here we go. We are now in a position to perform a new wire transfer. But let's look how things look like on the Cleafy side. We can see that this session was leveraging the stolen credentials has been also highlighted high risk. Even if the session is perfectly clean, of course, there is no code injection on this session here. And the attacker, we should notice, may also use remote access tools to back connect to the user endpoint in order to make the session appear as also coming from the infected endpoint. Let's look at this risk propagation, which is associated to the original session, still anonymous, as we can see, and the snippet of code, which was highlighted as compromising the application integrity. This is one example of how Cleafy can detect complex attack scenarios by analyzing multiple sessions at a time, leveraging fingerprinting and user prediction capabilities, and propagate risk across sessions.
All right, so hopefully this answers the questions about the account takeover scenarios and also shows some more complex example of detecting threats coming from complex scenarios where the attacker is leveraging information gathered from injection on a different session. All right, so what is your action plan, or better, what do we propose to be your action plan? First of all, we suggest, if you want to learn more, to visit the Cleafy website. You can also find a lot of useful materials on the Citrix Ready marketplace pages. In particular, there's a nice white paper about NetScaler and Cleafy, how we integrate in the NetScaler architecture and complement the Citrix application security portfolio. There are some research papers from analysts available on our websites, and 2-pagers, also white papers describing the solution at a deeper level. Feel free to reach out to me in case you want to learn more. You can also meet us face-to-face if you happen to be at the RSA conference next week. And hopefully we will also see you at Citrix Synergy next month. Those links are linking to our website, where we offer the opportunity to book a demo, to have meetings pre-arranged in case. And finally, what we really suggest would be to try our solution. Please do try it. We offer POCs. We can discuss different options for running those POCs. You can see here just one example from one of our customers that was able to implement our solution in less than a week. After just a few days, we were already detecting threats that were previously undetected. And after a few weeks, because the value provided was so huge, the solution was already promoted in production. The POC was conducted in production because, of course, the way that we integrate the ADC makes that approach completely safe. But at that point, after a few weeks, it was promoted to be a production tool. And in later phases, in the following months, we got a solution integrated with an adaptive authentication solution to improve risk scoring and increase threat visibility at the transaction monitoring level and reduce friction on the customer side. The application perimeter was extended to other applications from corporate and retail. As I already mentioned, with one single Cleafy instance, you can manage multiple applications and apply different threat detection policies and risk weights, for example. And finally, we also got integrated with a CM solution to provide visibility about infected endpoint to the SOC. Again, if you want, you can contact us at info@cleafy.com for any additional information. At this point, I think this was the content that we wanted to deliver. We're ready for some additional questions. Anil, do we have any?
Certainly, Giuseppe. And before we move on to Q&A, I just wanted to tell that these were real. The demos were really great. I think they highlighted the real world scenarios. And what I was thinking was, in fact, my credit card information was stolen very recently, and I wish we had NetScaler and Cleafy to have these detected. So one question from the audience is, so we know Cleafy detects a lot of these anomalies even before the session has started or during the session. So what happens after that? I mean, how do customers get alerted and take action immediately to kind of stop the sessions?
Yeah, that's an important question, and even if I had partially covered that topic before, let me go back to it because it's a very important one. It's also about the maturity in the adoption of the solution and integration in your security ecosystem. So initially, our customers have been introducing detection because they had absolutely no visibility on the endpoint side. So all threats coming from the endpoints were simply unknown. They were receiving possibly calls from their end users declining transactions, saying, yeah, this was not me, all right, I didn't do that transaction, possibly my credentials have been stolen. We're also aware of some customers swapping from one bank, this is for corporate banking, to another because they were not satisfied by the level of security that the first bank was providing. So detection is a starting point, but it's not where the story ends. And sometimes it's not even about having yet another console to look at, but you can take Cleafy detection as an engine feeding the risk score and the evidence, the injection of code, the malicious apps running on mobile devices to the next level, feeding, for example, a transaction monitoring solution or supporting forensic analysis and investigation. This will be also feeding a case management solution, or as I mentioned, integration with the CM is also quite common. This is also for supporting customer care and providing additional visibility to the SOC. So again, this would be possibly the next step. And at some point, customer definitely would like to react, right? And this could be simply activating a risk-based authentication, such as adaptive authentication, making sure that they are requiring additional credentials only when there is a high risk, because of course, every company, whether they are a bank or in any other market segment, they are concerned about not increasing the customer friction. These days, there's a nice statement about one of the top management people at Bank of America, if I remember correctly, saying that as a bank, they are not compared to other banks. They're compared to the likes of Uber and other services. So ease of use and low friction is an important value, but they can also adopt other response action. So specifically, protection, selective protection, which you only activate selectively when there is a high risk or for specific users that deserve that higher level of protection, is what Cleafy to protect can also deliver. And again, let me re-emphasize that point. If you are a NetScaler, as I hope, a NetScaler ADC customer, that means that you don't have to modify your NetScaler architecture. You don't need to include in your architecture any other component. No additional reverse proxying required for that purpose.
Right, that's really great to hear. Just thank you so much for that explanation. So it's really great to know you provided live demos and both were related to banking and financial sector. Do you have any examples of Cleafy working in other verticals, let's say healthcare or the government?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easy to refer to banks because that's where our experience, where we started originally working with some local banks here in fighting those frauds and identifying threats in real time. But these days, that's why I was also mentioning digital transformation initiatives. The kind of threats that we observe apply to any company exposing online services, which are consumed by end users, third parties, and whether this is about performing a real fraud or stealing credentials or sensitive information, this is a real problem that every company is facing. So the NetScaler ADC, WAF, and Cleafy solution set can protect any company against those advanced threats. And yes, definitely we advocate for any company to adopt that solution set.
All right, excellent, Giuseppe. So I think we are almost done with time, but let me take up one quick question and we can follow up. We can always get back with the other questions to the audience directly over an email. So how scalable is your solution, and what are the driving factors in terms of sizing?
I will definitely follow up on that question with some additional materials. But yes, the solution has been designed to be highly scalable, dealing with hundreds of millions of events an hour, for example, some of our medium-large environments. So it scales very well in terms of running on a cluster of different nodes. So you can basically expand the cluster by adding up new nodes. And we run on a virtual environment or as a Dockerized application. So even introducing our solution in your environment should be pretty easy. That is our experience from a wide variety of environments we've been dealing with. Hopefully
right. Definitely, that sounds really great, Giuseppe, to be able to kind of be platform agnostic and be able to work in any form factors. So that's really great to hear. So I see a couple of audience asking if the slides and the recording of this webinar would be shared. To answer that, yes, we will share the recording with all the attendees and registrants within a day or two. We'll also be sharing all the links which we presented in the slide deck. And with that said, we are just about to end today's webinar. I want to take a moment to thank Giuseppe for making this fantastic presentation and the demos and sharing great insights with us. Giuseppe, any final words?
Yes, maybe one final. We've been talking about web application, but I want to reemphasize that we cover both web and mobile devices, application endpoints that are running applications from those devices. We didn't talk too much about mobile, not even in the demo section for lack of time, but rest assured we do cover also threats that are coming from mobile devices as well. Thank you again for your time and patience, and thank you, Anil, for hosting me in today's session.
Pleasure working with you, Giuseppe. And last but not the least, I want to thank everyone who were able to make some time to attend today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed the session, and this shall conclude our broadcast for today. Thanks, everybody.